we were on vacation, and I had my computer on in the morning, left it open, turned it off, but left the screen open. Go play golf, come back, grab my computer, and it won't come on. And so, since I'm the oldest person on vacation, I thought, well, this is perfect. Because we've gotten younger here, and they're all tech geeks. So they're like, oh, what's wrong with your computer? Let me have that. And then they pass it off, and then they're having conferences around it. And I believe it was Cole figured out that there was a tiny pinhole in the screen of the computer. And mind you, these computers, which to my surprise, because I didn't know how much it cost, because my wife got it for my birthday a couple of years ago, thousands of dollars.
Oh, they're not cheap.
I mean, amazing. So they're like, look at this, because if you touched your finger on the screen, you would see a little bit of light illuminate. And so Cole said, what's happened is when that hole hit, and then he started talking a bunch of tech psychobabble about pixels and algorithms of light that all rush to the screen. So he said, your computer is on, but the screen is dark. And I was like, there's some kind of spiritual application here somewhere. So he's like, you need to go to an Apple store. So I was like, oh, okay. Well, babe, you ready? And he said, well, there's not a whole lot of Apple stores. And I said, what do you mean? In Alabama? He said, on the planet. Which I thought was interesting. So I was like, Apple store near me. And they brought up Metairie, Louisiana. I thought,
that's right where I'm at.
I'm in Alabama here. So what I found fascinating was there were zero in Alabama. There was one, and it was under renovation or reconstruction or something. So then they started looking up Florida. I was like, I'm not going to Florida to fix my computer. And so we had finally figured out, I said, I'll tell you what we'll do, because there was one in Baton Rouge. I said, we'll just drive. When we drive home, I'll stop in Baton Rouge and then just come home. But it added up a huge amount of time. And so then I got to look, and I said, well, maybe there's one in Mississippi. Yep, there's one in Mississippi. One in the entire state.
Jackson, Mississippi.
It's right north of Jackson. I said, well,
Yep.
we got to drive through Jackson anyway. Perfect. Solve the problem. And so I scheduled, because then I didn't realize you just don't show up. They said, well, you'll have to schedule an appointment. This became the equivalent of almost like I had to have a medical procedure on myself. I had to call, have a consultation, set up the appointment. Because they were saying, like, sayings of hope, and it's okay. Well, it became really weird to me.
They were working on your mental status, your emotional health.
So we do the deed, no computer. I go to this nice little, I don't know what you call them. They're like malls, but there's buildings. It was really
a strip mall.
Like a strip mall.
It's called a strip mall, yeah.
But so we circled the area, and I know there was on a Saturday, a lot of people, and it hit me, the amount of people, because we couldn't find a parking place. Missy's like, well, if there's only one in Mississippi, you realize how many computers are in Mississippi? You're going to be here a while. So she's like, leave the air on. Let me know how it works out for you. So she's in the car in the parking lot.
Speaking of emotional support,
mm-hmm.
That's the difference in Missy. I would have sent Lisa in with mine and said, babe, you got to do this because it's over my head.
So I grabbed my computer, walked half a mile because that was the nearest parking place. And I'll walk in this place that is wall to wall people. And when you go in, it was real fascinating because there's like triage centers that you move along through, figuring out what the problem is. And when you get to the back, they called it the Genius Bar. And there's one fella who's working all the cases. I guess he's the genius.
He's the genius.
And he's figuring out. It was just one of the most perplexing things I've ever seen. So I walk in, fortunately for me, because the first thing that happened was security immediately. When I walked in, they immediately came up to me. Because I look like I do, you know.
Well, you were very close in Acts 17, just a non-computer person. The Jews were jealous. They had a problem. So they rounded up some bad characters from the marketplace, formed a mob, and started. You're on your way to.
I was nervous, Phil. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
Because I don't know about computers, and now I'm in a world that I really don't care for a whole lot, but I need my computer. So, but fortunately for me, the woman who was the greeter, she recognized me. And I think she said something to the effect, "You're the last person I'd ever thought I'd see in this store." And I said, "Well, I appreciate that." I took that as a compliment. And she said, "Well, what's the problem?" And then she pushed a few buttons. "Oh, I see you have an appointment." Yeah. Okay. So that, I had to get passwords and all, which I don't know. She's like, "Well, you had to have a password at some point." I was like, "Well, that's gone. So can you give me another one?" So I get another one, because you have to be all ready when you approach the genius. You have to have all the ducks in a row so he can just look at your computer. And, of course, then I tried you could tell I'd been trained by Phil, because I was like, but I already know what the problem is. There's a pinhole in this screen. And she said, "Did you cause it?" And I said, "Well, that's an interesting question." Because not to my knowledge. I'm on vacation. I told her the story I just told you. So, well, he'll determine it. We have a group of investigators to figure out what happened. I was thinking, this has gone now from a medical procedure to a criminal investigation.
Yeah.
So, long story short, I finally make it to the back, Tim, and which ironically, Tim looked like the African-American version of me. He had a very long beard, which I commented on, but he was looking at me, because he didn't know who I was. And he starts the series of questions. I was like, pinhole. And so then he said, "Well, how we got into the investigation?" Because I realized then if I caused this, it was going to be a lot more money to pay to have it fixed.
All right.
And so I said, "Look, here's what happened." Well, here's what was interesting in this. I'm mid-story in how this happened, and I had nothing to do with it. And a stranger comes up and says, "Hey, Tim, if this guy is telling you that's what happened, that's what happened." And so Tim looked at me and said, "Who is this?" He thought it was my cousin, my brother, and I said, "I have no idea." And he said, "Well, I listened to your podcast." And I was like, "Oh, he listens to my podcast." So then Tim's like, "You have a podcast? About what?"
Where to get the best dumpster food?
Oh, it was so funny. But
Did you say it's supposed to be a Bible study, but we end up talking about things
Jews
like what's
were
happening right
jealous.
here?
The Jews were jealous back 2,000 years ago. So they rounded up some bad characters from the marketplace.
No, so listen to this.
Formed a mob and started a riot, Jace.
So look, when the fella who was a stranger, well, his son, who had a baseball uniform on, and his wife came up, and they're like, "Oh no, we can vouch for this guy. I was like, "Look, I don't need somebody to vouch for me. I'm just telling you what happened. Run your investigation, do whatever you want to. I just need the computer fixed." But then
Unashamed Nation to the rescue.
Oh, it gets better. Then the manager, who was an African American woman, she comes up because she thinks that there's a conflict. But she was like, "Ooh, Jase." I was like, she knows my name, and she's like, "Oh, I listened to his podcast." So then we started talking about the podcast. Well, then I noticed in that moment, Tim's attitude completely changed. from that moment on.